There's a weapon you don't see much in Onslaught builds, and with a little practice, you'll have so much fun. From the practically infinite rockets it can give you. You won't believe how deadly this weapon is, especially in this build, as I'll show you how your rockets can regularly ignite and scorch nearby targets, maximizing this weapon's already insane damage potential. But just in case you don't have the weapon that I highlight in this build, I'll share some other great options that can be very easily substituted. I initially didn't like using Phoenix Protocol. I knew it was super cheesy good with its capacity to refund half of your Well of Radiance, and the right team could be in Well of Radiance 90% of the time. But the playstyle felt too passive and frankly boring, despite how good it is. That is, until I found the perfect weapon for it. But more about that in a minute. I tried an Aegir Scepter build first, and it had great crowd control, but not the strongest damage. Arc builds had better damage and almost the same level of crowd control with blinding special weapon kills. I especially liked Vesper of Radius for locking down chokes and blinding targets by the ADU with your Rift. But I eventually used Phoenix for a group who was asking specifically for a Warlock, so I figured I'd go full cheese. But while setting up my build, I noticed something that I must have forgotten about, and how is everyone not talking about this for Phoenix Protocol? Ember of Combustion causes targets killed by solar supers to ignite and damage nearby targets. Now I knew this, however, if you read the in-game description, you'd think it only applies to direct damage caused by casting your supers such as Blade Barrage. However, it also applies to all solar weapon kills you obtain while standing in a well. Thank you, Dim. Since wells are usually thought of for single target boss damage or just general survivability, you don't usually think of it for ad clear. In fact, when I first remembered it, I basically just had a, that's cool moment. It didn't really click how powerful this would be until I found the perfect weapon to use with it. But one drawback to my weapon of choice is that it is a raid weapon, so not everybody has it. So, as I promised earlier, I'll note some other great alternatives out there, such as the weapon that ultimately inspired this build, and that alternative is Gjallarhorn. More specifically, it's Wolfpack rounds. These bad boys made Gjallarhorn a boss DPS and an ad clear powerhouse in D1. And even though the D2 version of Wolfpack rounds aren't as strong, they still do an amazing job at tearing down groups of chunky targets. Now, Gjallarhorn is a dungeon exotic, and so is also not accessible to everyone. However, you only need one person in the fire team running it, and it's usually pretty easy to find someone who has it. So as long as you're using a solar rocket, and it's a legendary rocket, not an exotic, then you'll be able to benefit from the solar ignitions provided by Ember of Combustion and the Wolfpack rounds provided by your teammate. In fact, you'll probably be happy not to be the one using Gjallarhorn, since your rocket won't tie up an exotic slot. The biggest con for Gjallarhorn is its ammo economy, as is the case for most rockets. This is hugely offset in Onslaught by the heavy ammo crates, and can further be offset by a teammate running Cenotaph or Aeon Swift. Dragon's Breath is another great option if you don't have Gjallarhorn or the exotic I use. It generally has better ammo economy than Gjallarhorn, especially if you're good about waiting until the fuel fully recharges before firing your next shot. The fire that it leaves on the ground is excellent for shredding spawn points and locking down choke points. It's also free from the Season 23 Season Pass, so just about everybody should be able to use it. I would recommend, however, that you swap to something else for boss damage if you're having a hard time hitting the boss from your team's damage spot. as Dragon's Breath can be a little difficult to do that. But even Dragon's Breath doesn't have infinite ammo economy, so this got me thinking, man, if only there were a rocket with better ammo economy. So then it hit me. Eyes of Tomorrow. This weapon has the perk Adaptive Ordnance, which refunds each shot as long as you are scoring 4 or more kills. As if this weren't enough, if you secure those kills, your next shot will also receive bonus damage, which really helps to keep building momentum towards rapidly refunding shots. Getting those multi-kills is really easy with this weapon because it also has the perk Eyes on All, which allows you to rapidly lock on and track multiple targets. The tracking on this thing is insanely strong. It doesn't matter how far away a target is, once you lock on, you're basically guaranteed hits, even if the target is across the map. So it takes almost no practice to score at least 4 kills. But that's not all. Eyes is a solar weapon, so it takes full advantage of Ember of Combustion. This will make it so much easier to secure multi-kills when causing ignitions with each target killed when you're in a well of radiance. This gets more noticeable as you start getting into the higher rounds and nearby targets aren't just wiped out by the initial shot's collateral splash damage. So all of this is why Eyes of Tomorrow works so well with Phoenix Protocol. You can basically just sit on the ADU, pop a well, and take out entire waves without ever having to move. Phoenix Protocol will give you your well back as soon as possible, especially if you have a Tether Hunter or other Warlocks spawning orbs for you with their supers. The Solar Siphon used in this build will allow you to spawn even more orbs for your teammates, so you can all feed off of each other and your supers can rotate as fast as possible. Wished into Being will also further speed up your well regeneration. If you really want to be cheesy, you can even use 4 Season 23 armor pieces, and Wished into Being will be able to trigger as soon as Phoenix Protocol refunds you to 50% of your super. This will create 3 orbs of power that grant somewhere between 20 to 30% super energy, and it can trigger more than once if it takes you more than 30 seconds to fill your super. It shouldn't take more than 30 seconds though if you and your teammates are running the right builds. To further strengthen the build, I use Ember of Eruption to increase our ignition radius by 20%. Ember of Char will cause our ignitions to spread Scorch to nearby targets. And Ember of Ashes increases Scorch stacks by 50%. Kindling Trigger and Ember of Ashes will cause us to apply 40 Scorch stacks to targets that aren't already scorched, as long as we are radiant. We will be constantly radiant because of Flint Striker from the seasonal artifact, because we will be continuously securing solar weapon multi-kills. You'll be splashing this Scorch dot all over the map constantly. The 50% increase from Ember of Ashes also means that 60 Scorch stacks will be applied to enemies near our ignitions. So, when you pop a well and start getting ignitions on kills, thanks to Ember of Combustion, surviving targets will already be primed with enough Scorch stacks thanks to the insane synergy of our fragments and seasonal artifact mods working together to set off secondary ignitions. I am really liking how well everything in this build works together, just like you should like and subscribe. Even though I can see this build getting weaker when the seasonal artifact changes, I wouldn't be too worried. This build will still cook. We further perpetuate our lethality with Blast Radius, regularly feeding us armor charges on Rocket and GL multi-kills. This constantly keeps our Solar Surge mods active. It also feeds nicely into Argent Ordnance to apply yet another damage buff to our rockets. I used a Lingering Dread Stasis GL with Disorienting Grenades and Chill Clip to help slow down stronger waves, and a Solar Hand Cannon for unstoppable champions. Your GL should be able to stop barrier champions between its freezing, preventing the use of their shields, and the Radiant buff that we should regularly have being applied to the GL. You could alternatively use a Chain Reaction Tusk of the Boar and build into Unraveling Orbs, which also helps with barrier champions. And you can also build into Horde Shuttle so that those unraveled enemies will be regularly spawning Threadlings. You know I'm a sucker for the awesome synergy between Unravel and Scorch Dots. I actually have a Slice Chain Reaction roll that I really like for difficult content because the Sever applied by Slice reduces all targets' damage, including bosses. Normally, it's recommended to have 2 builds to save and swap between for boss damage and add clear. However, this build is so deadly that you can just slay out infinite rockets on the boss while simultaneously wiping out enough ads to keep refunding your shots. If it's easy to secure multi-kills to refund your eye's ammo during ad clear waves, it is insanely easy to do this in the boss room. There's plenty of ads and there's way less line of sight obstructions, so locking on to multiple targets is laughably easy. You'll be feeding so many orbs to your team that you should be able to top each other off and keep rotating supers constantly. The only thing that I would recommend that you change is to maybe a sniper rifle in your special slot for the boss damage. The last of our mods focus on generating heavy in case your team is killing things too fast for you to get enough kills with eyes to refund your ammo. I also use solar reserves to further make it harder for us to run out of heavy. The map you choose does matter, and I personally like Vostok as the spawns are usually far enough away from the ADU and there are clear enough lines of sight for you to just sit in one place like some insanely overpowered rocket turret. If you like this video, please consider giving my Karnstein Armlets build video a try. It's great for solo content. Thank you so much for watching.